Welcome to a special edition of the Leadership Espresso Podcast. And this time it is with my friend Pedro Silva. He's a pastor in Boulder, Colorado. And we talk about the art of listening today. And I met Pedro through an article he posted in LinkedIn a couple of years ago. He was a senior recruiter then, and we kept in touch. We became friends, and now he is one of the people I refer to when it comes to the George Floyd Black Lives Matter movement in the US. So thank you, Pedro, for helping us out today understand what's truly happening in the US. What is the underlying dynamic in there? What do we need to understand as leaders in business about it? And what is it that we need to hear in business about it, Pedro?
Yeah. Thanks, Stefan, for even asking and for sharing your platform first and foremost. As you said, listening is a key component in leadership. And right now, whether people want to or not, they're in a situation where the business leaders of the future and the business leaders who will show up in this moment in the most dynamic way will be the people who learn how to listen. The challenges of listening are a lot. And actually, as you mentioned, I'm a pastor, and I lead a group of people. We call themselves visiting ministers. And they're basically lay people who just call and check in on people and see how they're doing. And the main thing we focus on is listening. And this is not a setup. This book is literally next to me right now. It's called The Art of Listening in a Healing Way by a guy named James Miller.
This is not scripted.
No, it's not scripted. It's just sitting right here. And I mean, I'm a pastor and I'm in These Are Strange Times. Another book I have is called Discontinuity and Hope, Radical Change in the Path to the Future, which was written a number of years ago. But I'm working on a sermon right now. So the situation is that for a long time, people have felt that, and we see this happening in companies, we see this happening in our country, in any kind of corporate entity. There is this idea of we call it corporate for a reason. Corporate, it means body, basically. And the way that we look at a body, a physical body, is that we put the most value on the head, and then we put lesser value on different extremities in the body. And then some parts of the body we don't even want people to see, or we have shame of those pieces of the body, things like that. This is something that, being a pastor, I'll refer to, talked about in the Bible. It talks about one body, many members, and it literally breaks down that one part of the body cannot say that it doesn't need another part of the body, and I can't say it doesn't need the ear, because it's all one body, and the parts that are considered shameful are actually great parts. And it's trying to teach us how to have a healthy communal body, and as well as a healthy social body, governmental body, things like that.
So how does George Floyd refer to this picture of the body? How does it fit in?
Well, if you look at us as one species, one human entity, one world of people, this is an example of how some parts of the body are extremely devalued and not cared for, and somewhat abused and historically, and treated shamefully. And there comes a point in time, just like anything in the body, if we just keep with that analogy, if you say a person finds out they have cancer in their pinky toe, right? Mm-hmm. Most human beings aren't going to say, oh, well, I got cancer in my pinky toe. I'm not going to think about it because at least it's not my arm. And I like my arm better than my pinky toe. They're going to address it. Mm-hmm. Or if they have any indication of a symptom, they're going to do something about it. But a lot of times there's certain people who don't like to address the symptoms. They want to ignore the symptoms because in their mind, they want to believe that they're healthy when they're in fact not healthy. And they'll be getting symptoms all over their bodies.
So
Same
what
thing
you're
happened.
saying, sorry. So what you're saying right now is that we do not address the pinky toes, and
Right,
we pretend as if we are healthy,
right,
and it's just a part that we can neglect. But
right,
suddenly, this pinky toe becomes the whole body.
right,
Eh, So, like in business, if you don't address the issues, even if they look minor,
right.
because in this case, the black people, they're minor,
In the society, they treat us that way.
it's they treat it as they're minor, but
Right,
after a while, the truth about that story is on a deeper level. It's inequality.
right,
So if we
right,
treat departments, people, organizations, areas of our company as being unequal, they will become major instead of minor,
right,
and they will cause a
right.
huge blow up. So that's what you're saying?
Well, to some degree, I mean, with the using this analogy for our country and then the world in general, especially like with things like colonization and everything like that, it's almost like, or it is like the body is someone's abusing their own body and then blaming their body for reacting to the abuse. If you get what I'm saying, like if I take a hammer, I'm an analogy person. If I take a hammer and I hit my hand, and then my hand stops working, then I curse my hand when I'm the one to hit the hand. When I made this choice to deliberately hit myself in the hand, it's ignorant at the highest level, but it's something that the human brain can do. We do it all the time. Like you walk into a room at night and you stub your toe and you curse the table. You know what I mean? You don't curse that you didn't turn on a light. And they say, why didn't I turn on this light so that I could see so I could see more clearly what's going on?
Yeah.
And that's something that we tend to do as human beings. We do it in companies. We do it in cultures. And I don't, in no way do I want to minimize any of this because it's important not to. But using business analogy, one of the things I did when I was a recruiter is I worked with quality assurance people in some of my roles. And most people are familiar with like Six Sigma and agile development, and actually about agile, and then also like the Toyota production system where they do the Kaizen and things like that. Well, in that organization, if you know anything about it, they value every person's input, every person's thing. That's how they maintain their level of quality. And they have a line in the production system that, like, if a person's a janitor and they're sweeping and they see that there's a screw on the floor, they can pull a line and stop the whole production system and say, hold on, something's not right. There's a screw on the floor. It shouldn't be there, because in order to make the quality vehicles that we want to make, we have to be mindful of these things.
So is it, if we go for this concept of equality, and inequality, is that the core of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the core to some degree. Yeah, I think it's the core of it. But then there's also the element, and we don't have enough time to get into all of it, but there's an element of self-delusion on the part of the oppressive force. And then there's this sense, there's this false sense that there are parts that are less of value than others. The equality, from my perspective, equality is reality. Inequality is illusion. So like, I'm equal. I don't need anybody's permission to be equal. That's how it is.
So how do you see
now?
How did we get into this place of seeing things not being equal?
Well, I think that to some degree, it's when a person or a group or an entity has a sense of low self-worth that they don't want to admit. And the only way that they can feel better about themselves is relativism. So that if someone's less than me, then I'm relatively better. And so that sense of being relatively better is enough ego boost for the person to keep someone else down in order for them to feel like they're better. And it's completely delusional, but it's been going on for a long time. And it happens everywhere, and it's become such a part of most systems that people don't even realize they're doing.
As I said, I mean, in your case, you're black and I'm white. but we have similar inequalities in Germany. We have the Western Germans and the Eastern Germans, or we have it on the global scale between men and women. So it's not a topic just purely, and I fully respect and I'm very humble about it, what's happening in the US, and I think this needs to be healed and addressed, and this is why we're having this conversation, because it's a conversation on a global scale. So I want to understand, and I fully agree that the origin of inequality is in a low self-esteem inside of me. So how do you think, how can we heal that?
Man, for me, I tell people, and I made a video about this. I don't know, it probably got like 7,000 views at least right now. And wow. I basically said, the first thing you have to do is look inside of yourself and find an inestimable value that exists within you. You can't wait for somebody's permission to say that you're of inestimable value. You have to come in contact with that within yourself. Once you come in contact with that within yourself, then you can project that into the world, because human beings, we project all the time. Most of us don't witness our thoughts. We're not mindful enough to be conscious of what's arising in our awareness. But if we are, and we are coming to this contact of this awareness that, like, I am of inestimable value, not from an ego perspective, but just from a contemplative awareness of our own inner being. Because each human being, even the worst expression of humanity, is a miraculous occurrence in history. Everyone is, because the fact of what it takes for one human being to be born, if you really think about it, is a lot, and all the different factors that come into their being. So if you can make contact with that, then you can look at other people and say, there's some inherent inestimable value within this person, and I'm going to go on a treasure hunt to find that. And people can sometimes feel, generally, I think they can feel when someone is looking at them in a positive way, just so they can feel if someone's looking at them in a negative way. But
yeah, I think we call this concept projection, right?
Yeah, projection. Yeah. And I think that that's important for us to do. And what's happened in our society is that people have projected their angst, their anxiety, their insecurity, their depression. They've projected it on darker bodies, for a long time. Black and brown bodies, red bodies, if you will, the different races. And there's a lot of work to be done in that area for people who've done that. So, and other people have caught that too. Like, we do it amongst ourselves, it's a disease. It's a psychological, emotional, mental disease from my perspective.
Pedro, wouldn't it be also true that both parties had to do this exercise? So, the black and the white. So both parties have to do it. So, I call this concept accountability. So if it happens in your world, we usually call it victim and victimizers. But the truth is, there are no victim and victimizers. We all are accountable for what's happening in our world. So I think the healing bit is, and this is the powerful healing bit, and we as leaders, I think we are here to serve. We are in service to others. So it's not from an ego point of view, I'm better than you, but it's like, I share my gifts. Now, if I don't see value in myself and I compensate for that, right, as a leader, the first thing would be is trying to do a step towards you and be in service, because this will give me the emotion of being of value. So I guess it's a huge, the situation is a huge, how should I call this, a huge call for us, again, to relate, to be in service to others, and to realize the value comes from being in service.
Right.
So this could be the best, outcome for today, that people start listening.
Right.
And from listening, they relate. And listening is the greatest potential. Listening is when you listen to the people that are least hurt. because this
Right.
is where you learn the most.
Right.
So
there's a couple things before we wrap up that I want to point out too. Again, using the biblical reference point, which mostly is universal wisdom. It doesn't matter if it's from Christianity necessarily. Personally, I choose Christianity for my own reasons, but there is a scripture passage where Jesus says, "The greatest among you will be the servant," and that's in Matthew 23. And there's a universal concept to that people can connect with if they want to. But I also want to talk about briefly the languaging issue, because there's going to be a lot of arguments and a lot of battles fought over words. And words are a unique phenomenon, because I was a linguist when I was in the military. And so I kind of understand the dynamics of language pretty well. And if someone hears Black Lives Matter, now some person, because it's without getting too harsh, when a person gets into rejection about Black Lives Matter, and if they get in rejection about that, it's because somewhere inside of themselves, they don't think that their life matters. And so when they hear Black Lives Matter, when for them to feel self-worth, Black lives need to be under their life. You know what I mean? So when they hear it, they're like, no, they might not be conscious of it, but they'll be like, no, I can't say that Black Lives Matter, because if I say Black Lives Matter, then I have to confront the fact that I feel worthless. And that a part of my value comes from being at least better than Black people. And I've had white people tell me that they basically get value out of the thought that no matter how low they are, they're still not one of us.
Yes.
You know, and you have to think about the psychological things that had to be going on for a person to convince themselves. And I've had conversations with white supremacists and other types of people as well. But for someone to be able to say to themselves, my value, the baseline of my value is that I'm always better than somebody, is a psychological issue. So they can't stand to hear Black Lives Matter. A person who can hear Black Lives Matter and not see it as a threat to their own self-perception is someone who already is in contact with their own sense of value. And so they project it and they go, oh, yes, Black Lives Matter too. I see that because I'm aware of my own value. I don't feel like I'm devalued. So yes, I can honor and acknowledge that your life matters as well. And they can go from there. And the reason why I bring this up and is very important is because there's going to be people who are going to resist this transformation in consciousness that we're in right now. And they're going to come up with every excuse that they can, not realizing that their excuses are actually hurting them from raising in their own consciousness and building greater capacities for leadership, for innovation, for creativity, all of those things. In their resistance, they're going to use words, and if they said it differently, that'll be my excuse. And there's going to be words like you mentioned, victim and victimizer. And you said in reality, there's no such thing as victim and victimizer. And that's true, but we're not really dealing with reality right now. We're dealing with the illusion.
Yes.
And because we're dealing with illusion, we have to use language to actually coax people or encourage them out of the illusion. And so, if a person has been harmed, and if we tell them, well, in reality, there's no victim and there's no victimizer, but they're experiencing themselves as a victim in that moment, that victimizer is also experiencing themselves as less than the reality of who they are. And for them to grow, to come into consciousness, they have to acknowledge that they're a victimizer. And the person who needs to move from this one state into a higher state has to acknowledge that they're a victim so that they can move out of it. And it's just like having any kind of disease, from going from unhealth to health. You have to say, I'm in this unhealthy place. I want to get to this healthier place. And languaging helps us navigate that. But if we get stuck on the words without listening to how that person means it. And this is the thing I'll say to whoever ends up watching this. When you hear somebody say something that you don't agree with because of whatever your reaction is to the words, ask the person this simple question: what do you mean by that? because if I use those exact same words, this is what I would mean. Help me to understand what you mean, and then have a conversation. If you can't do that, then you're definitely part of the problem.
Fantastic. I really like this, the insights that you share, particularly the last example. I think that's bridge building. That's very, very strong. And this is what needs to happen on a global scale, not just between black and white, but between any groups, And so thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for our friendship. Mm-hmm. And remember, everyone, in this we are all together. We're just in one on the same boat. So we want to make sure that whatever comes as a question, we answer this question. Just comment below. And until next week, be inspired. What else?
I have a song. I forgot that I wanted to bring it. Can you put the link to the song in the video description? I actually rap too, because I just kind of keep thinking of different stuff to do. You have to communicate to different people in different ways, linguistically. And I have a song called New Me. And there's a Black Lives Matter edit of it that incorporates a part of a speech that I gave at a protest, just a small portion of the speech. And it was made by a woman named Katrina Dawn Miller, who's a Black woman in Boulder. There's not too many Black people in Boulder, so people probably know who she is. And I just want to honor that.
Certainly.
Thank you.
And I guess we will continue our conversation. But for now, thank you so much for taking the time. And Pedro, all the best. And
same, man.
Stay in touch.
Yeah, I always appreciate you in our conversations, man. It's always cool.